Yet another relentless overachiever. We all know Anupama, maybe through her books, maybe through her newspaper articles, maybe through her television show. Anupama, over the last few years, has been one of the key people to define how we look at movies. And Anupama is very, very glad to have you with us as well. Thank you so much.
एकदम आगे मत आ, फ्रेम में मत आ, बस बाकी तू जो भी कर
ए खड़ा करा उनको यार.
You guys don't mind standing up for that photograph?
समीर उठना नहीं. जावेद भाई. Excuse me. मैम यो.
Thanks so much. Tulika, would you mind coming and cutting this cake, please? Thanks so much. So I leave it to the two people who are the actual stars of the show. Anupama, could you say a few words and then Tulika can Anupama.
My whole world is Bollywood and Hollywood. And I was like, corporate land, I don't know anything. But the thing that I really liked about the book was that it's not just about corporate land. In fact, it's values that we can all use in life. Which is why it's wonderful to have all these young girls here, because even though this is not a fairy tale, this is very important reading. These are very important lessons. So I really enjoyed reading it, and I got very curious about how, Tulika, you first of all connected. How did you even think that, okay, corporate connect?
Stories really bizarre. I read a lot, so I read 3 or 4 books a week, and I read a week here, so at night, and I read everything. So
Because I am.
Basically, I was coming back from a bar with some of my colleagues at HBS, and one of them asked me, "What are you reading right now?" And I don't know if you remember, but around last year, fairy fiction was really in fashion. And that seed was there, and I wanted to impart some lessons. And I wanted to leave behind my dreams in Bombay as I was leaving. And I thought, why not do it in the form of fairy tales? So that's how the book came along. Yeah. And one of the lessons I learned during my leadership career was to not treat anyone the same way. Because people are different fundamentally, so they deserve to be treated differently, whether they're male or female. Having said that, women have very different obligations outside the workplace. So there is a certain characteristic in terms of how we need to balance a lot of priorities, probably more than men. And there are obviously certain unconscious biases that exist in the workplace for women in terms of lack of mentoring. That can happen because if you are women in senior management roles, and unconsciously we tend to mentor people like us, so men get more mentorship. That does happen. I don't think they behave differently. I think at times they can be treated slightly differently, sometimes really unconsciously. Is that I could emotionally handle the situation, because I could never say bye to my teams or anything. And I took it out in this book. So what was my darkest period is what's brought me here today. And I think it's all in the mind. You can never control what happens to you. The only control you have is what you do with it. I really live by that. So does that explain?
So totally. So this book comes out of failure. That's amazing. A round of applause, guys. Come on. That's amazing. Now, in the book, you put a lot of emphasis on mentors, and you talked about mentors now. How does one actually find out? Because my experience in the media world has been that really nobody has the time. They don't care. Nobody, I have never found a mentor. And when I was reading this, I was like, damn, I would have been way better if I found one. So how do you find one?
I mean, I think this was the lesson I learned the hardest. Because I confused finding a mentor with politics. I thought finding a mentor was, political play, and I was very much about merit. If I do my job, why should I call anyone,
Suck up to someone.
Yeah, suck up to someone. And that's not it. We are so busy trying to be perfect that we see feedback as a sign of weakness, and we don't solicit it. And many times, if we look at ourselves, if somebody junior in my industry comes and says, look, I'm going through this problem, can I discuss it with you, because I respect your opinion a lot, and I want to know how you dealt with it when you were, my age or at my level, we'd be happy to do it. But when we are young, we never thought about doing it. Even today, there are lots of... I think when you build a network of mentors, it has to be people beside your line manager. Like I go back to the Cinderella story and about her stepmother and stepsisters, it has to be people who are not directly impacted by your success. So for example, I mentor people in other countries that I don't look after, because I can then give them a point of view which is not directly linked to a selfish agenda. So as a result, it's more valuable. I went to my office and said, this person doesn't understand, blah, 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 blah. I wish they would do this. And I always ask them this question, have you gone and told this person exactly in these words what you just told me? No. I said, so if you haven't gone and told them this, how do you expect them to improve or realize that this is what you think? And we end up building all this in our minds and then taking very furious actions, whereas the cruelest thing you can do to someone is not give them timely, constructive, objective feedback. And if you look at people who are successful, you'll find a lot of people, or the majority of people who are successful are surrounded by successful people. Why? And I don't think it's nepotism, I don't think it's because, they help each other or do each other's homework or whatever else it is. I think it is because they get great feedback and they are demanded to be better because the benchmarks are high. And if we can't get that, because maybe we don't have the same sort of level of success all around us, then actually soliciting feedback is a fantastic way to raise that benchmark. That was
So you ask people smarter than yourself?
Oh, absolutely. You ask everyone. I think everyone has a point of view. And for everything, whether it is about how was the launch today, what do you think I could have done differently? And everybody's opinion counts because it's a point of view. It could be the girls have disappeared.
They left.
The little girls have run away. It's become too serious. So it could be anyone, but it gives you a perspective which is much wider than you would have on your own.
Tulika, how do you take criticism? Because I'm a professional critic, and at times it becomes very uncomfortable. And I understand. I understand that what I'm saying hurts. It slices, And I've had people react very negatively. So how do you as a person learn to actually take that criticism in the right spirit?
I think there's a chapter about my father in the book. Understand with a calm mind the point of view. I'm not perfect. I feel hurt, feel bad, insecure, sad, all that sort of stuff. But at the end, I really believe that that's the only way you can do better. There's absolutely no other way. And if you're not ready, I think Peter Pan says it, if you're not ready to fall, you can't fly. So it's courage. And we talk about courage and heroes, and I think it takes courage to be a leader. It takes courage to be successful. It takes courage to be on television. It takes courage because you're opening yourself up to a lot of positive things, but a lot of negativity at the same time.
Yeah, it is very negative. I get slammed a lot, especially when I review Salman Khan film. But we won't go there.
I really like Salman Khan, but that's another story.
Alice, toward the end, Alice and the Rabbit, so she likes Salman Khan. Okay, point to be noted there. This perfect woman, this vision in blue. So Alice and the Rabbit find a bottle. And it says that one grows best when one is not lonely. Serving size is for one person only. That's very interesting. Why is it important to grow with other people?
I've spoken about this book to a number of people, and some of them are managers, and I've spoken about why, as a leader, the only job we have is to develop others. That's what we are measured on. And the fact that in middle management, you find people who feel insecure about it. So they think that they look good when other people perform, but you put them down. You sort of go up by pushing people down. And I get a lot of nervous laughter, because this is very idealistic. Haha. That's not how the corporate world works. If somebody comes up more than I will, then they'll outshine me. But if you really look at it, that's our job. And that job demands sacrifice. If you are more senior, you need to be more responsible, more patient, more humble, less angry, less impulsive, listen more, and sometimes give up a bit of yourself. So the serving size, one person only is the part of yourself that you give up. Grow. But a majority of people need to find a passion, need to find their own love story in what they're doing. And that passion comes through inspiration from good leadership. Both leading by example, so showing the way, and leading by inspiration, which is where you run harder along the way, are required from good leaders. And then there is the last, part of the normal curve, which is people who will not do well because they don't have that innate passion or ambition, whether they have good or bad leadership. So really then depends on where you fall on that normal curve and how you do it. Some people will always shine. They're like drops of oil. You try to put them in water and squeeze them down and they just pop up. And some people will sink. That's just the way it is. It's just the way it is.
Now I ask this question of stars a lot. That once you've attained stardom, does it sort of culture a certain, go out and do something totally unusual? What does it do when you are in a position of leadership? I mean, is there pressure to conform, or is there pressure to actually, or do you have a certain freedom to take risks?
Number one, I wish I was a star. But moving on from that, we need to exercise, but let's imagine it's like your abs, yeah, like your core. So I think the more you fail and the more you treat it as an opportunity and rebound from it, the more you get a belief that you can get through this and this too shall pass. I mean, one of my favorite sayings, I have it in my office, is, everything will be okay in the end. If it's not okay, it's not the end. And I live by that. So I think as I've become older, I've had bigger failures and they've resulted in bigger successes. And it's just the way it's been. It's been an adventure.
So don't be afraid.
Exactly.
What's been your biggest struggle, Tulika, as you ascended this corporate ladder to where you are today?
I think I had it slightly different to a lot of women today. My first job was in mergers and acquisitions in the 90s, when it was a real boys club. And I've heard three things in my life, all the time. I've heard you're young, you're Indian, you're a woman, as I work across the world. And it's been for people to stop seeing me as a woman or as young and just see my mind or what I can do. I think that's been the biggest struggle. Especially, for example, in Europe, I was managing European men much older than I was. In French, which is my third language.
How many do you speak?
In India, I've heard people spend more time and energy trying to find a smart way of doing things rather than just doing something. In fact, the only way, hard work is a muscle, you have to cultivate it. And the only way you can succeed is to have both perspiration and inspiration.
Hard work is a muscle. I'm going to remember that. Yes, I'm really going to remember that. Tulika, tell me, when you go out there and you see, men and women, what is the most common mistake that people make as they're trying to? Do we lose sight of our real goals, or are we not, like you said, are we trying to take shortcuts? What's like the number one mistake people make?
I mean, when I was writing this book, so for me this book was written like a movie. So it just happened, and then sometimes I had to pause and think, okay, where did that come from? And it was just like a diary, I guess. And there's a chapter on this teacup and saucer, and he says, I'm a cup full of tea, am I half empty, half of tea, and am I half empty or am I half full? And I think that's the biggest mistake people make. When they are faced with a challenge, they get binary vision. So they think it's either this or this. It's either my career or it's my family. It's either children or my job. It's either I get a promotion or I leave. I either get into this MBA school or I do something else. This is typical of, what I found. And I think if we pause, thought, then we actually discover that there are lots of other options. As soon as you are looking at any answer as only two solutions, you've not thought it through enough.
You said you have to be around smarter people around you, right? Because You have to surround yourself with smarter people. Why would a smart person want to invest so much energy and time in you?
I think, number one, I think if we actually achieved what we were capable of achieving, we would literally astound ourselves. And there is no reason, I think my mom said this one, wherever mom is. She said there is nothing you can't do if you put your mind to it. We all have two eyes, one nose, one mouth, two hands, two legs. So as a result, we are all mentor worthy. I think the difference between people who have good mentorship and people who don't is people who reach out to people versus people who don't. And people who have the emotional intelligence in the situation to know how they are cultivating that relationship. So both reaching out and then having a little bit of EQ around how you nurture that relationship. So
childhood. But I really wonder, how did you actually make that happen? How did you translate a fairy tale into a corporate lesson?
and I love them. And I love them over and over again. I watched every Cinderella movie, every retelling of Cinderella as well. And I think there is number one, there is a child in all of us. And I love the fact that we're all so grown up, but there is a child in all of us. And that child can make grown-ups smile. When I looked back at those fairy tales, I think from that conversation at Harvard, I looked at Cinderella, for example, and I said, okay, it's life, and business is life. There's no difference. As I keep saying, people think work and life is different. We take life lessons from these fairy tales when we are younger. How does this apply to work? And it's true, Cinderella had two stepsisters and a stepmother who made her work really hard every day, had absolutely no interest in her doing better. That's very similar to the position some youngsters find in organizations where they have a boss who makes them work very hard every day, or they have colleagues who don't want this person to, be seen in a good light. And if this person doesn't reach out beyond this little reference point, Cinderella spent many years working extremely hard, and she was a model of virtue and beautiful and all those lovely things. So you can have all the fantastic traits in the world, but if that's your world, you can never get out of it. And then, the fairy godmother, what was she? She was somebody outside that network who saw her for what she was and gave her everything that mentors can give you. Sponsorship, validation, protection, coaching, literally through the coach. So I think there are lots of parallels, and I think in the book you'll find being binding, whatever you're doing, how would you take that and make it an opportunity? And that's a question, depending on what you're doing, you have to answer. For me, it was actually reading everything I photocopy.